Hello, my name is Dr. Ibi. I welcome you to lesson number 6 of this course on this book, Becoming the Best Version of Humanity. This is a book that is trying to introduce you to the one best way to know yourself and live your life so you can be all that you should be as a human being. Now, this lesson number 6, is looking at self-concept. That is what you think about yourself, or self-identity, what you think about yourself. There are 3 aspects to your self-concept. It has to do with number 1, your self-ideal or your ideal self. Your ideal self is looking at the ideal person that you think that you should be. So, by the courtesies of society, by the courtesies of religion, culture, and so on, we have an idea what society expects of us, what God expects of us, what important people in society expect of us, what parents expect of us, and so on and so forth. So we have an idea about expectations of us, and those expectations are meant to be the ideal that we should work towards. Okay, now what we think of us now is what we call our self-image. Our self-image is the way we see ourselves now. Okay, our ideal self is what we think that we ought to be. Our self-image is how we see ourselves now. There is a gap between your ideal self and then your self-image, and it makes sense. The way you are now and what you should be, there's a gap, or there could be a gap. Okay, your self-esteem, which is how much you value yourself, okay, depends on the gap, okay, how wide the gap between your self-image and your ideal self is. If the gap between your self-image and your ideal self is small, you're going to have a good self-esteem. What it means is that you have just a small gap between what you think you should be and who you think you are. It means that you are so close to being ideal. So you should feel good about yourself. But if what you think of you now and what you think you should be, which is your self-ideal, if your self-image and your self-ideal are so wide, then you have a low self-esteem. It means that you're thinking that there's so much work to do. There's such a gap that exists between self-image and your self-ideal. Okay? Having made these explanations, I need to let you understand that self-esteem, all right, sometimes depends on the way you think. It does not always depend on the fact that there is a wide gap or a small gap between an ideal and the reality. Okay, why am I saying that? Sometimes what we call ideal may be unrealistic and unattainable. Okay, for instance, if society says that if you're a woman, you should be married by a certain age. If you live in a society that thinks so, and then you are not married, you're supposed to feel bad about yourself. Okay? But you can live in another society which does not think so. That people are single walking around, they should be happy. In that sense, you feel you have a good self-esteem in that society. Or you are in a society that thinks that a woman should have given birth, all right, by a certain age, or should have some children, biological children. If you don't have biological children, you don't feel good about yourself. In that society, if you are there, you have low self-esteem, bad self-esteem, you feel bad about yourself. But there are other societies that don't mind whether you have a child or not. You can go and adopt a child and they are okay with it. Nobody's talking about you, complaining, and so on and so forth. So sometimes the expectations of society, of people around us, of our cultures, of our religious beliefs, and so on, can induce that feeling of inadequacy in us. And it's not because there's something wrong with us, but because such expectations cannot be met or are unrealistic. Okay, so these are just examples I'm giving you. But that said, at times you have to look at an ideal that you could become to feel self-actualized, to feel fulfilled, to feel you have become all that you should be, and then bridge the gap between your current reality and that ideal. Okay? You should understand that there is a way you think of yourself, whether you know it or not. All right. But the goal of this course is to suggest to you the one best way to know yourself and live your life. Don't forget, everything I'm doing now is to give you a reality from the perspective of psychology. This is who we are as human beings, okay? Through discovery, through learning about the human being. But I am going to suggest to you the one best way to know yourself and live your life, okay? We're going to talk about another important issue, your personality. Your personality, a consistent way of thinking, feeling, and behaving, okay, in the next lesson number 7.